webinars bring the most intriguing and interesting researchers, thinkers and practitioners in the education space direct to those engaged in leading learning. I'm Mark Starvel from Principals Australia Institute in beautiful Adelaide, and I'm going to run you through a little bit of housekeeping to make sure that your experience is as seamless as possible this afternoon. So firstly, it's a good idea for you to have, apart from John and myself, your video and your talk turned off, and most of you have those turned off at the moment. So if you see you've got a blue microphone on the talk button, it means your microphone is open, and that could potentially lead to some awkward and embarrassing moments. So if people could keep their talk and video turned off, apart from John and myself, that will protect your bandwidth. Another thing that will help you is to turn off anything that's using your computer or your attention. Think of things like Outlook, Skype, Dropbox, SkyDrive. The more things you've got turned off, the better your connection's going to be. If you are having any difficulties this afternoon, you can always access the fabulous Shannon via the text chat box. Drop her a line and she'll be able to help you, or she might even post to the toll-free number for Blackboard Collaborate and they might be able to help you. Don't worry about not being able to get your full team to this event. Even though it's not nearly as good as live, we do record this event and we provide a transcription of the entire text chat box, and we welcome you to share that with your wider staff after the event. That will be great. It's important to note at this point that a webinar is not TV. This isn't just transmission, and we're going to encourage your active participation this afternoon in asking questions, in posing your thoughts, and in responding to the content that John will be sharing. Let's have a quick look at the important tools that we're going to be using and make sure you're comfortable with those. If I could just draw your attention to the image on the screen. One thing that you've already shown me that you're great at is using the text chat. Tonight, think about it just like Twitter, a place to post notes, post questions, and to think out loud in the spaces in between. What I'll do as facilitator is pay attention to that chat stream, and every now and then I might stop John and say, look, quite a few people are asking a question around what are the next plans for Candlebark next year? Are you going to become a P-12 school? Or somebody might have a question that's about, John, could you talk to us about how assessment and reporting practices work in your school, or transition between junior primary and primary? So feel free. We have John for an hour. You can ask him questions and he can either answer them or possibly provide some kind of sort of fictitious account, being a creative sort that might satisfy us, and then we can move on to another question. The other tool we want to just check on is the emoticon button. Could everybody click on that? I'm pointing to it on the screen. You'll find yours to the left-hand side. And pick an emoticon, smiley face, an applause, something like that. Thank you, Pownet. Thank you, Jan, Gillian. Quick off the mark. So for everybody else, let's get you also to pick an emoticon. Lots of applause there. Fantastic. We have a big group. It's important that we know that you haven't fallen asleep at the back of the virtual room. Fantastic, and a big warm welcome to all of our friends from Northern Territory. There's 15 people hiding behind Rex there, which is sensational. The other tool that I'd like you to practice is the hands up tool. Could everybody click on that? You'll find that over on the left-hand side of your screen. You'll see you're being given a number. Terrific. Keep going. You're doing well. Now, this will be useful during the session. We might stop and we'll ask for hands up if anybody has a question to ask John, or possibly to respond to a question that John might ask. So be ready to click on your hands up button. And the last one, just to make sure you're okay with, is the poll button, in this case indicated by a tick. So if everything is good in your universe at the moment, could you click that and give me a green tick? And if it's not so great, you can give us a cross. Let's see how you go. It is getting close towards the end of the school term. Great. That shows us that you're all alive and well. Don't forget to use the text chat as we progress. Sensational. So let's just move edging into introducing John. With us today in the PowerNet hot seat, we're delighted to have John Marsden, Principal of Candlebark P10 School, located in beautiful Romsey, which is in Victoria. Candlebark is an independent school located on 1,100 acres of natural bush setting. I've asked John to come along tonight to share with us his experiences as a leader at Candlebark, the leadership lessons learned, the achievements, and I guess what he hopes to be the legacy there. I had a great opportunity to visit Candlebark at the start of the year and work with John and his staff. And the things that stuck to me coming away were the following. One was the use of learning spaces, both within the school and around the school. I was interested to hear about the personalised learning pathways for the students at Candlebark. I was interested in the quality of the teachers and their predispositions. And when I spoke with the teachers over lunch and during the day, I got a real sense from them that they were keen on creating learners who were active and informed about their learning. So they were the things that I thought would be really interesting to find out more about. Now, what John's going to do, I would imagine, is give us a sense of his personal and professional journey that's brought him to this place and space in time. And I think that this afternoon you're really going to enjoy listening to the story of leading and teaching learning at Candlebark from John Marsden, who's just entering the room now. He likes to make an appearance. And John, are you ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, hi Mark. I just had to remember to turn the microphone on. And to be honest, I also snuck into the back room to get a can of Coke Zero to give me a bit of a caffeine hit for this afternoon session.
That's great. Well, it's over to you now, John. Now, are you okay to navigate the slides?
Well, I was hoping Shannon might do that for me, but...
Okay, that'll be fine. Shannon will be happy to do that.
Yep, that'll be good. We just prepared some slides for people to see as I talk that would give you a bit of a picture of how the school looks and some of the activities that the kids are engaged in. I was a bit... worried that I'd be late for this webinar because I had some typical issues that all of you would be familiar with. There were a record number of kids managed to miss buses this afternoon. We had 8 kids managed to miss the bus, and 4 of them were mine, so I take personal responsibility for them, but not for the others. So there was a bit of chaos as I quickly tried to organise lifts for them. And then I had a grade 1 kid who's hanging around here waiting for his mother, who will be another hour or so. And he wanted to come in for a chat, so I had to kind of tactfully point him in another direction. So all in all, it was a bit of a rushed few minutes, but very typical of schools. And I guess one of the things that is so important in running a school is to have skills in both macro management and micro management, or to be able to see a big picture and to talk about concepts and to have an overall sort of long-term vision, but at the same time be able to attend to the kid in sick bay who may be faking or may be genuinely sick, and the kid who's missed the bus, and the kid who's crying because someone else has just taken their toy away in the sandpit. At lunchtime I had a grade 6 boy bursting in to my office full of indignation because another boy had taken his bike and wouldn't give it back. So we're all involved in that kind of stuff all the time, and it's important to try to be strong in both areas. I think when Archbishop Hollingworth was Governor General, and there was a whole lot of controversy over his role as Archbishop of Brisbane in his previous incarnation, and it was suggested that he hadn't been effective in handling complaints of sexual abuse. And his response was, well, I'm a big picture person. I left that sort of detail to others. And when he said that, I thought, well, you shouldn't have had that job, because if you can't attend to both the micro and the macro, then this is not the job for you. At the same time, I've got to say that being a principal is really, I think the first thing that I became aware of was that just like a water tank with a few rust holes in it, and you know how the water finds those rust holes and comes gushing out very quickly, so too all the weaknesses I have were very quickly exposed by being a school principal. And I became aware very quickly that I had weaknesses that I needed to address. And unless I turned those into hopefully strengths, or at least kind of managed to minimize them or work out ways or strategies of dealing with those weaknesses, then the whole school would suffer. And so it is a job where you're very exposed. And where you are not strong in certain areas, that's something that painfully we have to confront and try and do something about, and really be proactive in trying to just work on ourselves to make ourselves better at the difficult and often quite isolating jobs that we have. I wanted to just talk a bit though about the school and what makes it what it is. And it happened that today I was talking to a couple of student teachers from Bendigo who wanted to come and have a look at Candlebark. And so they just spent half a day here. And I was talking to one of them who's actually in the middle of a PhD. And he's doing it on educational theory, but he said he's really sick of educational theory. And the more he hears of it, the less impressed he is by it, and the more irrelevant it seems to him to be. And I said, well, I'm kind of glad you say that, because I'm a little embarrassed about the fact that Candlebark it's not based on an educational theory in the way that Steiner or Montessori or other systems might be. But what it is based on is a couple of principles that I think are quite sound. One of them is that I try to find teachers who have lived adventurous lives. And I do that because I think that these are people who will have stories to tell, and that makes them pretty attractive to students, of course. But it also means that it's more likely that they'll have a better sense of proportion. They'll be able to see things in perspective. They'll be able to understand the context and the relativity of stuff that happens. So I don't want teachers who've spent their whole lives in a classroom, who've never ventured beyond the suburb that they live in, because I think that they'll probably be people who find it difficult to see the big picture. So if a kid, sneaks some chewing gum into class, or scratches the desk, or is using their mobile phone in class. Sorry about that phone noise. Hello, it's all going off here. I'll just try and shut down a few things. If those little incidents happen, it's important, to use a cliche, not to sweat the small stuff, but to recognize that they are very trivial incidents in life, and we shouldn't get ourselves into a lather about them. We should try to retain some perspective. And so choosing teachers who've, hitchhiked through Russia, or they've composed a score for a symphony orchestra, even if it's never been played, just the fact that they're enterprising enough to want to do that. Someone who's taught in Thailand or South America or Tanzania. I look for people like that who've shown spirit, they've shown a sense of adventure, they've shown a willingness to engage with the world, and they've shown a sort of creative energy in some way. I also think that one of the things that makes our school a bit different is that we have a huge range of excursions and incursions. I tell people that we probably have more excursions than any other school in Australia. And I guess we facilitate that by having our own buses. And that was one of the first decisions I made when I thought I wanted to start a school. I was adamant from the start that we had to have our own buses, and we had to have enough bus seats to convey every kid in the school. And to further facilitate that, I got parents, when they enroll their kids here, to sign a generic permission form, so that the form says something like, the school can take kids anywhere, anytime, without seeking specific permission for each trip. And the costs of those trips are incorporated in the school fees, so there's no further money needed for the trips. And what I wanted was a school where the kids would recognize that the classroom could be anywhere. It could be a museum, it could be a gallery, it could be the top of a hill, it could be down in a gully, it could be in a Aboriginal stone quarry, or Aboriginal quarry that we have just north of here. It could be in a historic park up at Ballarat, Sovereign Hill. So I wanted them to have a school where, when they got to school, the teacher might say to them, okay, hop on the bus, we're going into Romsey, or we're going to Melbourne, or we're going to Ballarat. And to just have that kind of confidence and mobility, and to recognize that learning is a global matter. It's not something that's confined to the four walls of a classroom. So, yeah, we've got kids out and about all the time. One of the English teachers took 4 kids on a road trip the other day for 4 days. And They went down to Warrnambool. They were recreating a trip that's described by Nadia Wheatley in her book, The Night Tolkien Died. Now, that trip probably cost us about $1,400, I guess, for 4 kids for 4 days. But it's worth it because they'll remember that for the whole of their lives. Like, long after they've forgotten my algebra lessons or my lessons on nouns and verbs and adjectives, they'll remember doing that road trip to Warrnambool. We've had trips, we've had kids go to WOMAD in South Australia. We've had kids go overseas. We've had kids go to Northwest Australia. We've had kids go on skiing trips, on canoeing trips, on hikes and camping trips. Now, we do it economically, thriftily, and so I'd say that the cost of educating a child here is really not much greater. It might be a couple of $1,000 a year at most, more than it costs the government to educate a kid in a state school. But we do manage our finances in a way that enables us to do this for minimal costs. We also have a lot of interesting people come into the school because I think it's important to expose kids to as many different types of people as possible and to hear about different people's life stories, because I want them to be aware of the possibilities that are out there in the world. And so we've had a guy who sells coffee at Melbourne Airport, for example, an African guy, because one of the teachers talking to him one day as she bought her coffee realized that the reason he runs that coffee stall is so he can send money back to his village in Africa. And she thought he would be a great person to come and talk to our kids. And so he came up here and spent an hour or so here. We've got a Japanese sushi chef here at the moment, and he made lunch today for the kids. We've had a British archaeologist, the mother of one of the teachers, come in and talk to the kids. We've had lots of different parents come in and talk about their jobs, everyone from a police officer who trains other police officers in the use of firearms. It was a very popular session, as you can imagine, to a nutritionist, to someone who's an advocate for disabled people, to a newsagent, just anyone I can grab who's got a story to tell, who's lived their life or is living their life. They're going to have something that'll be worth having the kids here. So those things help make the school distinctive. And I suppose the last thing that I should talk about is that we encourage a sense of adventure in the kids. The school's kind of secret motto, it was not very secret, but the school's unofficial motto, that's the word I was looking for, is take care, take risks. And we emphasize the second part of that pretty strongly. So we have kids climbing trees, rolling down hills, playing with sticks, riding bikes, riding skateboards. And you may think that this is a recipe for disaster and we probably should have an ambulance parked at the front gate. But in fact, in 8 years, we haven't had any really, too serious injuries. We've had a boy break his collarbone in a wrestling class that was being taken by a teacher at the time. We had a girl on camp in first term break a small bone in her foot. We had a guy get his teeth knocked out on a water slide down near Geelong a couple of months back. But really, for the number of kids we have and for the active lives that they lead, we have a minimal number of injuries. And I think that's because the kids learn to take care of themselves. They learn to look after themselves. They know that there won't be an adult there at their shoulder 24/7 telling them, take care, don't do that, be careful, look out, watch out. That doesn't happen. So unless they look after themselves, they're going to get hurt. And so pretty quickly, they learn to keep an eye open and to judge risks for themselves and to start to evaluate whether the activity that they're doing is a sensible one or not. I guess I don't want kids leaving here not able to cross the road in Paris, for example, at the top of the Champs-Élysées where the traffic is completely homicidal. I don't want them unable to cross that road. I want them able to make judgments and to navigate their way through life and not to leave here helpless and incapable, as seems to be the risk with the way a lot of schools operate. The idea, for example, that we have to have adults telling kids outside schools when it's safe to cross the road and when it isn't is disturbing to me. I think although we're all very keen for kids to avoid physical injury and even worse, to avoid physical death, by being over anxious about that risk of physical injury, we risk having kids go through a kind of spiritual death, a kind of death by 1,000 cuts in a sense, where they have this lingering emotional malaise which can last a lifetime and which who's to say which is worse, a broken leg or that physical malaise, that emotional malaise that I'm talking about? It's a very hard thing to balance those out. So obviously we don't want kids getting hurt here, but we accept that there will be bruises and scratches and grazes pretty much every day, and there are. But like I say, we haven't so far, touch wood, had anything that's made me feel that we're on a dangerous path or the wrong path. So a lot of that involves educating parents, and I guess the last thing I would say about Candlebark would be that I'll rephrase that, sorry, it could be ambiguous. I would never say that Candlebark is a democracy. It's a dictatorship, and we don't have a parent body, we don't have a school council, we don't have a governing body. We have me, and I figure, well, I'll probably make as many mistakes as a committee, or maybe as fewer mistakes, or maybe more mistakes. We'll never know, because we don't know what this school would be like if it was governed by a committee. But we know that if we did have a committee governing it, the committee would make a lot of mistakes, and I know that I make a lot of mistakes, but who's to say which is better or which is worse? All I can do is evaluate my own performance as honestly as I can, and to listen to the feedback I get, and to keep note of the turnover at the school, and if people leave, why they leave, and to see whether they've got valid grounds for being dissatisfied with the school. So I use all those checkpoints to try and make sure I'm on a good path. But it's like Carlos Castaneda wrote once, the main thing is that the path should have a heart. And I think this school does have a good heart, and I think that the kids are on a good path, and we have a school here that's working. There's a very good vibe here, and people who visit the school comment within minutes on how energized the students are, how welcoming they are, how trusting and open and friendly they are, and how adventurous they are. They're very fit. They run everywhere. The only person here with the weight problem is the principal, and the students certainly look healthy and fit, and they kind of run all day long. They're very active, and I think that's got to be good for them in all kinds of tangible and intangible ways. So I might pause at this point and see whether anyone's got questions or comments.
Yep, that's great. That's a perfect time for a quick pause there, John. And I know that Shannon will have just turned off your microphone, which is great. It sounds like maybe there is a health risk of being a dictator, and it's to do with that's right, becoming an overweight dictator in the office. That's funny. What I'll do, people in the room, is I'm just going to do a quick summary of the things that I've heard, and then we'll cast over to you. You're certainly welcome to put up your virtual hand to ask a question of John, and then we'll move on to hearing from John, but we'll give him a chance to get his no sugar cola into him. John talked about the importance of both macro and micro leadership, and I think I got a strong sense of the critical importance of relationships in the business of leading learning in a school, that it is the small things and the small interactions that matter, and they tell the story of what is most important. I really liked your idea about talking around the fact that leadership, the principalship, does expose your personal and your professional weaknesses, and the challenge is to turn these into opportunities for improvement. I really liked this kind of notion of real-world contexts for story sharing, and story sharing from teachers who have led adventurous lives, so therefore have a story to tell. Engaging in excursions and incursions which provide experiences which give students stories to tell and shared experiences to bring them together. People that have lived interesting lives, from the coffee seller at the airport through to local people, and bringing those in again to provide shared stories around intrigue and interest. Being able to provide real-world context and a global perspective without having to connect on a webinar to Nairobi or to Malaysia. You've looked for the opportunities and you've brought them into your school. Let's just check in with Susan Owens. We might need to give her the microphone. I'll just see if I can do that. Just one moment there. Susan, if you just click on your talk button, that'll put up your blue microphone. I've got a feeling Susan's clicked on the wizard button at the top of the screen by the looks, and that will probably confuse her completely. So let's just have a quick check through the chat box while Susan has a play around with that. People loved the mosaics, they've liked the images, so obviously there's going to be a bit of commentary from you, John, in a moment to explain some of those images and how these influence learning or conversely have been influenced by learning, which will be interesting. Let's just see whether looks like she's having a bit of a struggle there. Shannon, you're on the line at the moment, right? Could you just clarify for me, Shannon McGeary, that it is you navigating the slides, or is that John?
No, that's me. Thank you.
Okay, that's you. That's fine. No worries. So John can certainly let you know which slide he would like to go to. And Susan Owen has stopped now running her audio wizard. So Susan, if you would like to click your talk button and pop on the blue microphone next to it, she's clicked on the wizard button again. John, let's go back to you in the studio and let's hear a little bit more about your work there, your leadership journey at Candlebark, and maybe explain some of these images to us.
Yep. And I'd like to comment too on some of the comments made in the chat room, because I've been scrolling through them quickly, and there was one from Helen saying that beautiful surrounds do influence us. And I think that's true. And I think it's absolutely essential that we surround children with beauty. And if we don't do that, we are neglecting their education in quite a basic way. The fact that we're in the country and we're lucky enough to have this environment is our good fortune, but it doesn't matter where you are, you can create beautiful surroundings. And if you come from an inner city school, for example, that can be done through artwork and through gardens and by having floral decorations or whatever around the school. But to expose children to beauty all day long is to do something unconscious and intangible, but nevertheless very powerful with them. I also wanted to comment on the question about the parents and how we involve them. And I kind of go against the prevailing dogma a bit with this, because we don't automatically include parents here, and there are very good reasons for that. For one thing, like any school, we have parents who you wouldn't want to get near kids for $1 million. So if a parent's got an intervention order against them, for example, or if they've got criminal records, if they've got a history of drug abuse and they're currently using drugs, and we have parents like that, just as every school would, then I don't want them in my classrooms. So there's no sense in which we throw the doors open and just let people come marching in. What we do is operate on what we call an invitation and acceptance, or an offer and acceptance basis. So we can invite parents to be involved in things here, and they can accept or not, as the case may be, and parents can offer to be involved in things here, and we can accept or not, as the case may be. And we make that clear to parents when they enroll their children. But we do invite parents for a number of things on outings and excursions and camps. We do invite them to help with reading programs from time to time. There is a standing invitation for all parents to come to the morning meeting that starts each day, and there's a standing invitation to all parents to drop in for lunch any time they're passing, which is a bit of a risk given what I said earlier, but we do keep a good eye on people who are here if we have any concerns about them. But there's the current kind of political thinking is that parents should be almost, in my opinion, over-involved in the running of the school. I didn't do my 4 years or 5 years or whatever it was at university so that I can have someone who's never been near any teacher training come in and tell me what I should be doing in the classroom. I know what I'm doing. I'm a specialist. I'm a professional. I've been doing this for quite a long time. And what I do is underpinned by sound theory and by sound knowledge of education. So I'm just as, my antipathy towards parents kind of trying to run the school is about as great as a dentist's antipathy would be towards my coming into his surgery or her surgery and telling them how to extract teeth or how to give anesthetics. So we're quite assertive in some ways. We don't like to get bullied or pushed around, and it's actually very difficult to resist that, because every week there is pressure on us from parents, which sometimes becomes a bullying, a quite naked kind of bullying, and we have to remain strong and remain resolute to withstand that. I remember talking to Morris Leitzman about a year ago, and he was saying that he goes to a lot of schools, and sometimes the librarians at these schools tell him, look, we'd love to stop your books in the library, but we can't. We've had to remove all your books from the library. And he'll say to them, why did you have to take my books out of the library? And he said, the answer is always the same. The answer is because a parent complained. And he said to me, who gives these people such power? How is it that one person out of 300 or 500 or 1,000 parents can dictate what books the 300 or 500 or 1,000 kids in the school are allowed to read? And I think we do have to be very mindful that as a profession, we will lose respect in the community if we don't emphasize to people that we are specialists in our profession and we are trained and experienced, and all those years of university were not spent playing dominoes or 500 or drinking down at the pub, even though some of the time may have been spent in that dissolute way. The other thing I wanted to mention, someone asked about the checks and balances on us, and really most of that is kind of informal, I guess. We do get inspected every 5 years, as do all Victorian schools, but I guess the checks and balances are that we would know pretty quickly if we were doing a bad job. Kids would start being taken away by their parents, and the feedback around the community would be negative. We'd be getting vibes in all kinds of ways. Kids would be acting in ways that would show that they were alienated and angry and frustrated and disappointed by the school. We'd see ugly graffiti in the toilets. We'd see a rise in violent incidents between kids. We'd see a rise in classroom, poor behaviour in classrooms, but we don't get that. We have very few management problems in those areas. We have never had any vandalism, never had any graffiti. Occasionally a kid will have a outbreak and an outburst in a classroom, or a kid will be naughty or difficult for a teacher, but that's pretty rare. And the other question that I was asked was, what happens when I'm ready to retire? And I've given this a lot of thought, and I've really tried to encourage younger teachers here to step forward. And I'm very keen on the prospects of a couple of them in terms of future leadership of the school. But if I can manage an orderly withdrawal and retire at my discretion and hand the school over in good shape to the right person, that would be great. But I have to also allow for the possibility that I'll get hit by a bus sometime tomorrow, and my principalship will come to a sudden end. And so in my will, I've just nominated a group of people who are a mixture of teachers here and parents and ex-parents and so on, and even students, current students, who can take over the running of the school, and they're people who I trust to do a good job and appoint the right person. And that's all I can do, really. You can't guarantee the future. You can never control the future, much as we would like to, and much as we spend a great deal of energy in our lives trying to do exactly that. Anyway,
Yeah, John, there's a question from Suzanne Owens. I think there's two questions here. One is about, I think people would be interested to know about how your how the leadership, is distributed in your school. So, whether you have a deputy, whether you have a curriculum leader, those sorts of things. The other question is from Suzanne Owens, which just talks, I think, around, if you can see that one up there, my question is about teachers. Their role in your school seems to be quite different. Can you talk about this and how teachers adapt and the professional learning that might be needed, I guess, about the induction of new staff into Candlebark? I've got a feeling you've answered a bit of that by talking about how carefully you select your staff. But do you want to comment on that for us, please?
Yeah, and the two things might kind of go together a bit. My motto as a principal is to say yes to everyone who comes into my office as much as I can, and that's at least 90% of the time. So if a teacher comes in and says, look, I want to take 4 kids on a road trip to Warrnambool, I'll say, okay, fine, go for it. If a kid comes in and says, I want to cook lunch tomorrow for the grade 6s, I'll say, okay, yep, talk to Fiona, who does the cooking, and I'm sure that won't be a problem. So I just sit here and say yes all day, which is, I'm simplifying the whole thing, of course, but that is the my first principle in running the school is to just say yes as much as I can. I figure if I get great teachers and let them loose in the classroom, then that's the most powerful thing I can do as a principal. And so I don't interfere with what they teach or how they teach it. And I deliberately appoint quite a range of people, a range of ages, a range of genders. We're about 50-50 in male, female, a range of experiences. I deliberately appoint some people who are quite conservative and who've got quite conservative views on how to teach, and I deliberately appoint people who are quite radical and quite adventurous. And I figure if they're really good teachers and if they've proven in their previous jobs that they are terrific at what they do, then my main task is to facilitate them in teaching in the style that works for them. So whatever that style is, I'll facilitate it. For example, we have one teacher who lined the kids up outside his classroom every lesson before they went into the classroom. And I used to walk past and look at that and think, gosh, that's kind of not really what I'd imagined this school would be like, but I didn't say anything to him until after about 6 months. I thought I must ask him why he does that. And I said to him one day, why do you do that? And he had a great theoretical explanation for why he does it. He said, I want them to understand that there are different zones. And the zone that they're in at lunchtime, when they're running around and talking to their friends and socializing and playing games, that's different to the zone in the classroom. And I want a clear demarcation between those zones. I want them to stop before they leave one zone and enter the other, so that they realize that they are now passing from the play zone, the social zone, into the academic zone, the learning zone. And I thought, God, that's a really great explanation. I really like that. And I said, so would you be doing this sort of for the whole time that you're teaching at the school? And he said, no, it's just, I just want to get them into this certain way of thinking. And he said, I won't need to do it much longer. They've pretty much got the message. And when I said before it was 6 months, it was probably only 3 months. But anyway, he did stop doing it a few weeks later and hasn't done it since. But I've noticed he's suggested that to a couple of other teachers who are new to the school if they have control issues, and they have adopted that. And I think, yeah, fine, if that's what it takes to get the kids into the right state of mind before they come into class, great. But it's equally, if someone wants to have the kids in the classroom making crepes as part of the French lesson, or swinging from the ceiling as part of an English lesson, well, fine. Obviously, I don't want anarchy, because no one likes that, even kids. And but at the same time, I know that the people I've appointed are good, and I need to give them as much room as possible. And to further that, we try to minimize the bureaucratic side of their lives. So we found, by reading the very fine print, that school reports don't actually need to have comments on them at all. The government is perfectly satisfied if you just send out grades. So we tell parents when they enroll their kids, all you'll be getting from us is a letter grade at the end of each semester for each subject. And occasionally teachers will write a comment. For example, if they give a kid a D, I do insist that they explain why the kid got a D and what the teacher is going to do next semester to try to help the kid raise that mark. But reports here don't take days and days. They take, an hour or two. We have a minimal number of meetings. We have one meeting a week, which goes about an hour to an hour and a half. But that's pretty much it as far as meetings goes. Parents know that they can make an appointment any time to talk to a teacher if they want to, and that they can ask for a set of written reports with full comments if they would like that any time. But very few people do ask for those, probably only 1 or 2 a year. And as for meetings with teachers, yeah, there's probably 2 of those a week on average, I guess, where one teacher will sit down with one set of parents to have a chat about their child. So it all helps just enable the teacher to concentrate on the classroom and on teaching, which is what I want them to do. I don't want them to spend their lives filling in forms. So things like risk management, crap for excursions and activities. The school's business manager does that, working off a template. So it's all kind of kept out of teachers' hair, and it's not allowed to impede their work with the students.
Good, thanks for that, John. I think I've written down a couple of notes from that. You're a great person to grab quotes from. I think what you're saying, what I'm hearing there, and this gives you a chance to look at the text chat, but then we also want you to obviously tell us a few stories from these images. But what I was getting from that is to get out of the way of the great teachers. You know, you've chosen the right people with the right qualities, and now your job is to both get out of their way and to clear their path from the unnecessary distractions to allow them to focus on their primary role of creating an engaging, stimulating, frustratingly wonderful, compelling learning environment. I really liked that description about the zone and the lining up, and I'm glad you shared that story. That was a great little kind of anecdote where it shows me that as a leader, you're prepared to seek first to understand before you do anything else. So you actually have invited a conversation from that teacher about their practice instead of just making an assumption. So I think that was a good little example, and I would imagine everybody was clapping around the, you know, this logic around the reports. You know, it seems to be in many schools that once the reports are finished, we can get back to the business of learning, which, you know, seems to be absolutely outrageous. A comment came up in the text chat box, and it's about kids. And there's this sense that you get from some people that kids without really strong boundaries, if you like, will become free range and chaotic. And then there's this other sense that kids given an opportunity will instinctively and almost intuitively seek to create order and control because they like it. And you kind of suggested that a moment ago when you said kids don't like anarchy either. Would you mind just talking for a few moments about how your kids, because I know they have some time every week where they can explore. Do you want to talk to us about how that helps them learn to organise and take control? Thanks.
Yeah, I think the first thing is that if a child is worried that the teacher can't control the class, as they would put it, they will test that teacher every day until the teacher can prove that he or she can manage the class. And that testing will go on for years, if necessary, because children have to have that assurance. They have to have that security that comes from knowing that if the class starts going crazy, there is one person in there who can bring it all back together and bring the situation under control. And so that's kind of very simplistic and old-fashioned language to use phrases like keeping the class under control or bringing the class under control. But nevertheless, that is part of a teacher's function. And unless you have that ability, you will not be effective as a teacher. So once you've proven to the kids that you can do that, they'll stop testing you and they'll relax. And then some really adventurous learning can take place. But as long as they're fearful that you are not capable of doing it, yeah, like I said, I'll keep pressing that button to see whether you can manage things or not. So although these kids are very friendly and very good-natured, nevertheless, you can lose control of a class here as quickly and easily as you can in any other school in Australia, as quickly and easily as a babysitter can lose control of one kid in 5 minutes. So it's not difficult to lose control of a situation. The best teachers have such an assurance about them, such a quiet confidence, that the kids don't even bother to test them, because as soon as the teacher walks in the room, the kids just know, oh yeah, this is someone you don't tangle with, you don't mess with. This is someone who can make the thing work the way it's meant to work, and so they'll just relax straight away and get stuck into the learning without any difficulties. But young teachers, first-year art teachers in particular, often need to develop that if they're going to be truly effective. The free time that you talk about, Mark, is on Wednesday afternoons, where we have about 2 hours of free time where the kids can just do some quick mental maths. Actually, it's more like 2.5 hours, I guess. Kids can spend that time any way they want. So they might read a book, they might talk to friends, they might play basketball, they might climb a tree, they might do nothing. They might hang out in the sandcastle, they might help in the kitchen. And I'd say in 8 years, I don't recall any kid ever saying to me that they were bored during that time. And we do that because I wanted to do more than pay lip service to the idea that we should respect children's play. Everybody agrees that play is important, that it's an integral part of growing up, but unfortunately, the opportunities for play seem to be very restricted at the moment for many kids. And I wanted to make a very strong statement about the fact that we do respect the right of children to play and the importance of that time for playing. And so we give them that 2.5 hours where they can do whatever they want. And if I were braver, I'd make it a full day, which Fitzroy Community School in Melbourne actually does. And I don't know whether it's about kids learning to manage themselves. I guess that is part of it, but that wasn't how I thought of it when I brought it in. It was just a way of giving them the freedom to explore all the relationships and possibilities inherent in mixing with other kids and interacting with the environment during free time. I forgot what I was going to say there. It slipped my mind. Something about free time. No, it's gone. Anyway, it doesn't matter. What else did I want to mention? I was just scrolling through some comments before. How do I know teachers are doing a good job? Someone asked. Again, just informal feedback, but also I wander through to school every day and just, spend a minute or two in each class, just kind of strolling around, really. Often it's to show people around, and that gives me a good chance to see what's happening in the school and get the vibe of each group and each class. Someone asked, are all children welcome to enrol? And yeah, they are. We deliberately take quite a number of difficult kids, and probably at the moment up to half the applications I'm getting are from kids who have not been successful in other school environments. So about 6 weeks ago, we took a boy who'd been expelled from Year 9 at the local Catholic high school. We've got a boy in Year 7 this year who has come directly from a boot camp in the Northern Territory where he was kept for 7 months to try to change his behaviour patterns. We took a girl from the same boot camp. She'd been there for 5 months. That didn't work out. She clearly wasn't ready to for this school or for any other school, and that was unsuccessful. But the other two are going. The boy who was expelled is going exceptionally well. The boy who was at that boot camp for 7 months is going okay. There's going to be a long time before I think he really is contributing to the place in a positive way. But I said to the staff yesterday it'll take at least a year probably of patient work with him before he's really got that generosity of spirit that we look for in all human beings. I should mention also at the end of the day the kids clean the school. There's no cleaners employed here. And so the last 20 minutes is spent cleaning. And that's everything from toilets to classrooms to the outdoors and the kitchen area. And the kids, as you'd expect, we get the full range of responses. There are the ones who hide behind trees or suddenly develop an urgent need to go to the toilet. But we also get kids who are fantastic at it and a lot who are somewhere between those two extremes. But it's an important principle, I think, that people should clean up after themselves, that they shouldn't expect kind of shadowy adults to come in at night and clean the place for them and clean up their mess for them. It should be their responsibility. And there's a metaphorical lesson in life that we hope they'll take from that. Okay, back to you, Mark.
I was too busy nodding and pondering about cleaning the school then, and those kids sneaking off to the toilet. I hope they were taking their blue loo and their brush with them. You just mentioned generosity of spirit, if you like, as one of those graduate outcomes for Candlebark. And in a moment, when I finish talking, I reckon it would be useful, John, if you just let people know about the structure of the school. They'll be interested in your numbers. They'll be interested in the fact that you've added a year level this year and what your plan is to go how far. They'll be interested in how are the classes structured. Is there a year 2 class or are you a multi-age group? Those sorts of things. So just tag that one just to talk about in a moment. One of the important things for me that you just said was around taking away the stress. So for the learners, taking away the stress for them. And in doing that, allowing then the learning to happen. So essentially getting rid of something in order for the kids to be ready to accept something, and for some kids that taking a little bit longer. There was an interesting comment made from David Easter, I believe it is, in the text chat box, who talked about, how ironic it is in many schools, certainly that I know around Australia, the reduction in playtime as a response to the increase in behaviour. And maybe the environment that you have access to, the sheer fact you've got, almost a square acre for every child or whatever it might be, maybe that impacts upon this too, the place and space, but I'm sure there's a bunch of other context there. Have a look through the text chat box, but John, could you just have a chat to us about the structure of the school, the student numbers, how it's growing, where it's growing, in which year level, and then I want to hear about the library too.
Yeah, there's a lot there. The spaces are important to us, but I still believe that the best teachers can teach in any space. They can teach in a barn or a carport or a paddock. But it's a great privilege for us to have the space that we have, and we do exploit it. And we have a creek that runs through the school with a little waterfall, and that's certainly a magical place for the kids. And I think we all know that if you put kids either in or near water or in or near sand, you can kind of pretty much step back and let them go for it, and they'll be happily occupied for hours. We do have a bush classroom, which is just a rough timber platform in the forest, and which has a tarp on the roof and some timber struts to hold up the tarp, and some pretty rough-hewn stools and desks that the kids can use, and quite a few maths and English lessons take part in that classroom. And that is a lovely spot for learning. You're sitting in the middle of a forest and there are no walls, so you're in a terrific environment there. Those photos on the screen at the moment, that's the greenhouse on the top right, which is part of the organic garden, which is a very important part of the school's life. The greenhouse is just a homemade one, but it's been terrific. And down below that is a teepee, which is just a frivolous kind of thing to have. And yet, yeah, it's kind of, kids love it and play in it and kind of have lunch in there sometimes, or they just sit in there and talk, or they play games in and around it. And so it's just creating interesting spaces, I guess, is part of what we do. The next thing I want to do is get a whole lot of hay bales and put up a hay shed and just let kids play on the hay bales, because there's something wonderful about being able to clamber over hay bales and jump off them and roll down them and so on. I know when we were excavating the site for the library, the huge mound of dirt that we had to dig out, because the library is underground, the huge mound of dirt we had to dig out became a wonderful playground for the kids, and they spent months kind of playing King of the Castle or running up and down it and getting very muddy at in doing so. The thing that I forgot about before when I was talking about play, and remember there was a comment that I wanted to make and that went out of my head, but it was a comment I read years ago which said that all play is a preparation for adult life and an imitation of adult life. And if you look at play in that way, it's very interesting. It is. It's always kids imitating adults, and in doing so, preparing themselves for their adult lives. And so I guess that's how I justify the importance of making play part of the curriculum or the timetable here. The structure of the school, we have 131 students at the moment. We have planning permission to go up to 200. We don't want to rush to 200. We're just kind of inching up gradually to see how it feels and whether the vibe stays good. We get up to 4 applications a day, and a lot of them are from people, like I said before, who are really struggling in the school system. We have a lot of Asperger's kids here and a few autistic kids, and we get a lot of applications for kids with those particular disabilities. We have a lot of kids with learning difficulties, and we run quite an intensive program to help them and to try to bring them to raise their reading age and spelling age and so on. We go from prep to year 10, which in prep in Victoria is the first year of school. So these are kids who turn 5 before they come to school or in the first few months of their school year. We've just gone to year 10 because we noticed that in the past, when we went to year 9, our graduates were having trouble adapting when they went to other schools to do year 10. And we figured that if we go to year 10, then our kids can go to year 11 at another school. And there seems to be a quantum difference in the way the kids are treated in year 11 compared to the way they're treated in year 10. It's almost as though some magic happens over Christmas where teachers believe that kids go from being irresponsible, untrustworthy adolescents, to being young people who can be treated quite democratically and who you can have decent conversations with and who you can treat with respect. One of the comments in the chat room I noticed was someone who wrote that respectful relationships are at the heart of teaching, and I so agree with that. And those two words are so equally important, that the relationships are absolutely fundamental, but they have to be respectful, and that has to work both ways. We treat our kids with courtesy, and we expect them to treat us courteously and to treat each other courteously. And I've used that word 3 times, and it's a word I use every day. Courtesy is a great word, and I'm constantly saying to kids, a courteous thing to do there would have been to have held that door open while she came through with that pile of books or whatever. So it's a nice word. It's not too threatening and not too judgmental, but it's a good way of establishing the kind of behavior that we want from kids. I should also add that I was talking to John Hattie, the author of Visible Education, a year or so ago, and he said something which really resonated with me. He said that 90% of what we talk about in education doesn't really matter. We spend most of our time talking about things that are unimportant. And when I see people spending so much time and energy debating things like the national curriculum, I'm afraid that for me that would be in that 90%. I've seen a lot of curricula come and go, and at the end of the day, we're still teaching the same things, really. We're teaching literacy, we're teaching numeracy, and we're teaching an understanding of the universe, of our own planet, and of humanity. And no matter whether the subject is humanities or English or science or art or dance, those things are still fundamental. And I don't think it really matters too much what is spelt out in curriculum documents. It's really about how those human beings, the teachers and students, relate to each other and work together in the classroom and outside the classroom. And that's where we should be spending most of our energy and devoting most of our time and attention. I was just giving a significant pause so you could cut in there, Mark, if you wanted to.
John,
someone has asked if we're going to year 11 and 12. We don't plan to. I think it's quite good for kids to have a sort of halfway house when they leave here before they go into the wider community of TAFE or university or the workplace. I think it's quite good if they go to a big high school and have a couple of years of that kind of experience.
Thanks, John. John, I'm just aware of our time, and we're scheduled to conclude reasonably soon, probably in the next 4 or 5 minutes. And I feel like we've only just scratched the surface, of these conversations, which is both a great thing but also a travesty. Would you mind just having a flick through the slides, because we love to see them, and just give us a little bit of commentary about some of those which which particularly tell a bit of a story of Candlebark.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So I'll world-acclaimed author, I like that. We'll skip over that one. So the sign there was done by the art teacher, and attached to the wall. The library we've talked about a little bit. It doubles as a fire safe haven, as Shannon's written there, and it is a great space. Built for about $1 million, which is pretty good going these days, and built under that Kevin Rudd, Julia Gillard program. which unfortunately seems to have been, how can I put it, I guess full advantage wasn't taken of that money in some school systems, and perhaps because of the tight deadlines or perhaps because of the lack of imagination, but we were very happy with what we got from that. I put the motorbike in there because I just thought it'd be something funky to have in the library to attract kids, especially boys. And I bought it on the internet for $3,000. It's a Russian Cossack bike, and and it sure does attract kids. Yeah, it's just anything that'll kind of engage kids and attract them. One of the horror stories I've got about schools is going to a school in New South Wales a few years ago, and it was a terribly hot day. And I was in the librarian's office at lunchtime, and I said to him, "God, it's hot, isn't it?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "You know, we've got this state-of-the-art air conditioning system that they put in the holidays." And he sort of paused, and I waited for him to say, "Yeah, and I'll turn it on." But instead he said, "Yeah, I haven't actually turned it on yet because you know what will happen if I do? There'll be half the school in here in no time." And I thought, yeah, you wouldn't want that, would you? A lot of kids in the library, boy, that'd be the worst thing for a librarian. So, yeah, you keep coming across people like that and thinking, boy, they do a lot of damage in the education system. I wanted a library full of books, and which is getting a bit old-fashioned these days. And we buy most of our books in op shops, or we get freebies, or we get donations from parents of kids that their books have grown, books that their kids have grown out of. So our library budget's actually very small, but we do have a huge number of books in it for the size of the school. So that's a few shots of the grounds, and like I say, we are very fortunate to have this environment. It's a nice little herb garden. I've talked about most of that stuff before. That was a poster that the kids did for the school fete a few years ago, and the other images of kids who've done some cooking and using the ingredients from the organic garden for preparing lunch, and some artwork, obviously. A lot of this stuff self-explanatory. Music's obviously a big part of the school's life, as is art, as is dance. I'm ashamed to say that writing isn't as popular as it should be, and we don't have all that many kids who are really, obsessive about writing, so I'll have to work on that. These are images from the fete largely. Our fete is run entirely by the students. The parents are not allowed to help. We keep them, or even though with some of them you have to almost physically tackle them like rugby style and drag them away, but from their kids, because they keep wanting to take over. But the kids choose what sort of activity or fete or rather stall or whatever they want to offer, and they set it all up beforehand. They do all the running of the stalls, and they count the money the next day. We do have to educate the younger kids that if you make, $15 on your Lucky Dip stall, you can't then go and spend it on the Toffee Apple stall next door, and that's a painful lesson in life for some of them. These are more shots mainly from the kitchen garden. There's a dog being washed there on the left. We have a couple of school dogs who come in and out of classrooms as they see fit. That's a mural in the library or a collage that the kids did with broken tiles. And I think that's all, is it? Yep. Oh, I think I've gone too far.
You're going all over the place. Thank you, John. One of the things I certainly got from there as we move towards the wrap-up is, and thanks, Shannon, is that it seems at Candlebark that the arts are fundamental and not ornamental. So I certainly got that message. If we could, people that are still in the room, if you could reach over to your emoticon button and find your virtual applause that's next to the smiley face and generate a virtual applause. Thank you, Gillian, for John. And thank you, John, so much for your generosity, your honesty, your willingness to share openly your story at Candlebark. We also appreciate this afternoon the contribution of the participants in the panel in listening intently, the great conversation happening in the text chat, the thinking out loud that's been generated, and there's a lot more questions and comments and discussion than we can manage within a 1 hour webinar, and that's with going over just a wee bit of time. I try to pick out all of the time with webinars, John, some of the keywords people use, and I've grabbed these out from this webinar. Generosity of spirit, magical, courteous, beautiful, enjoy, understanding, and humanity. And I don't reckon I've seen those in the current drafts of the Australian curriculum, so I think you might be onto something there about creating the kinds of learners who will flourish into the 21st century. So everybody, if we could just generate another quick round of virtual applause for our fabulous guest, John Marsden. And John, if you would just like to flick back on your microphone, you are more than welcome to acknowledge the participants in this afternoon's webinar.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I'll just finish with two quick comments. Firstly, I emphasise that fun is not what we're about, that there are serious matters that we need to explore in the classroom. And so if kids say, oh, that was a fun lesson, or can we do something fun today, I'm not interested in that word. Learning is a delight in itself, and sometimes that can be really enjoyable, or really fun, but sometimes it can be pretty serious stuff too. So I talk about motivation, but I would never use the word fun when it comes to learning. And the second thing is, I'll be a little bit, give a little lecture here. One of the comments in the chat room is, what a shame we can't implement many of these ideas in mainstream education. And I want to say to you that that needs to be reworded, in my opinion, that as long as people keep thinking we can't do this in mainstream education, then no one will. But rather, we should be thinking about how some of these things can be implemented in mainstream education. My other favourite little mantra comes from Harry Truman, which is, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. And time again, when people come into my office with problems, I say to them, well, how are we going to solve this? And what are some possible solutions? So if you want to see these ideas in mainstream education, let's think about how that can be implemented rather than just say it can't happen, because it can happen, but it's going to take a lot of will on our part and a bit of creativity as well. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everybody.
Good. Thank you again, John. Thank you, Shannon, for your fabulous help in the control deck and liaising with John to get this show on the road. It's much appreciated, as always. Thank you, participants. If you want to say a farewell to your colleagues via the text chat before you head off to your evenings, walking your dogs, preparing meals, like John about to go to the gym to visit his personal trainer, then I trust that you travel well to your destinations. Thank you, good night, and we'll see you at our next webinar. Great, and thank you, John. Everybody will drop out of the room now, and you'll get an email from Shannon tomorrow with some screenshots and a little bit of a report from tonight's webinar, and we can have a conversation afterwards about that, okay?